Hi, and welcome to another episode of About the Authors TV. I'm your host, Jake Brown. Get ready to be swept up into a whirlwind romance. Reese Witherspoon not long ago declared a One Day in December, a sentiment that Josie Silver's writing seems to roundly inspire, from impossibly romantic being how Cosmopolitan described the two lives of Lydia Bird, and Good Morning America crowning One Night on the Island as a quirky and funny in that smart British way and truly enjoyable. This rom-com is the book to pack for your next adventure, which is exactly what fans did with their Melody Bittersweet series over Crazy Spooky Love and Kooky Spooky Love, where Brit & Co. guaranteed this page-turning romance is perfect for the beach. The Library Journal declared after finishing A Winter in New York that it deserved its own movie, while the book reporter predicted that Slowburn Summer was a surefire hit. And she joins us today to talk about it all. Josie, welcome to the show. Now, how young could we have first found you roaming library aisles as a child? And who are any of your favorite authors, looking back, you feel helped shape you as a storyteller?
I was a kid of the 70s and 80s, so there was no, technological advances. It was all libraries, which I think is where it began for me, really, because my nan was a real voracious reader, and she kind of took my sister and myself to the library once a week, every week, and I absolutely loved it. It was just that. She'd have this huge pile of love stories. She was a big Harlequin Mills and Boon reader. So she'd have next to the TV a massive pile of that she'd work through every week. She'd sort of have a dozen that she'd go through every week and go back to the library and change it. And she took us, and there's just something about libraries, isn't there? It's that the smell and the quiet and it's just never changes, does it? Even now, if you go into a library, you still have that sense of safety, I think it is, with libraries and with books in particular. And just the magic of running your hands across the spines. And, I used to I've always wanted to be a writer, and I'd make a little slot in, where my surname is, a little space for the future, for when my book is going to be there. And I think that was it, really. It was, instilled in me from being a kid, really, that books are magic, and that stayed with me, and it's always been the thing that gets me through everything. I think reading is my kind of, you know, when things are good, I want to read. When things are bad, I want to read. I'm a reader as much as I'm a writer these days, I think.
Who do you like to spotlight as any academics who rooted you on back when you were first finding your voice on the page?
I was pretty fortunate, really. I went to a state school, which was really huge and busy, and I was science, no, maths, absolutely not. But English, I loved it. It was my favorite subject. Um, and I love everything about it, really. I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to, to writing essays. I absolutely loved it. I'd be all my notes and all my colour code. It's a girl thing, I think. All my colour coding and everything had to be. And I'd spend hours just doing all of the prep work and that stuff. And I did have one teacher, actually, Mr. Howell, and he would so much red pen over my essays, and he would say, I've put a lot of stuff down because I found it interesting, so that encouragement that he was finding what I was writing interesting enough to cover it in red pen and, have conversations about it. And I've still got, actually, my folder of essays from when I was kind of, gosh, back in, the 80s. I was 14, 15. And I've still got those essays, and I'll go back sometimes and just still look at them now. And I've got sons, that kind of age now, and I'll show them, and they're like, oh no, she's got the folder again. But it was everything at the time, those little comments of encouragement. And you know I, I think he definitely gave me this feeling that I could do it. And if I could go back now, I'd love to just go back and say, that he was the person, really, that did give me that feeling of, you've got this. I didn't do well in every other well, I did all right, but I didn't do brilliantly. But English was always the one that, I felt confident with. And that comes over, doesn't it, I think, in your writing, if you can try and be confident with what you're putting down.
Exploring your first era of publication, writing under pseudonyms, Cat French throughout Love Your Neighbor, My Perfect Stranger, One Hot Summer, and The Bed and Breakfast on the Beach. What advice do you have for authors who may have to write their way to success through different eras to enjoy it? And to that end, any favorites from your early catalog?
I've actually been writing under different pseudonyms for since 2009. Resilience is the key, isn't it? You know, you've got to be prepared to take knockback after knockback and to know that it's all subjective and one person's opinion isn't going to be everyone's opinion. Um, and you get a lot of no's and, you know, you just file them all in your file and you just keep going. Um, and you'll get one yes. You know, at some point there will be someone who says yes, and that will be the person who changes everything, whether it's an editor or an agent or you know, it's just a case, I think, of treating your writing sort of like you'd want to treat a good friend or a lover. You know, you make time for it, you set time aside for it, even when you could be doing something else. You put your bum in the seat and you write, even if you don't feel like it, and the words that come out feel like glue on your fingers. You just keep going, and sometimes they won't feel like glue. Sometimes they'll just feel like, you know, lightning in a bottle moments of magic where you can just, it feels like something's channeling through you rather than actually plodding. I spend a lot of time doing the plodding type of work. Do you know what I mean? Just trying to force it, even when you don't feel like it. And then the payoff is those times when it feels like magic. Um, and you kind of keep going just for those sessions that do feel so special. Um, it's a funny job, isn't it? You know, I absolutely love it. But my goodness, I don't even want to say it's hard work because it's not that it's hard work because I wouldn't want to do anything else in the world ever. I feel really lucky and really fortunate that it's gone the way that it has. Um, but you do need to be really resilient, I think, and just trust yourself and kind of, you know, back yourself, even if things aren't going quite as you want them to. But even before that, you know, it's the first time that you see it on the shelf in the supermarket. You know, that was like amazing. And then going and finding that space on the shelf in the library that I'd been to as a kid and looked for where my name might be, to actually see it there. You know, it's like it's full circle, isn't it? You know, it just, you know, makes your heart happy.
Calling all hopeless romantics, People magazine mused after finishing One Day in December. Whereas Cosmopolitan reveals a chance encounter on a London bus turns into a Bridget Jones inspired romp. Did the inspiration for this begin as art imitating life, while you yourself were perhaps riding on a bus one day, people watching?
A previous editor that I'd worked with who'd moved to Penguin, and she just called me up one day and said, I want to I want a love story and I want it to be a Christmas love story. Are you interested in taking it on? Um, and absolutely, yeah, you know, I said absolutely, leave it with me and I'll have a think. And I'd got this kind of desire to write a story about love at first sight. And I had when I was much younger, just this brief moment where I'd looked down from the top of a bus and this guy had looked back up at me, and it stuck with me forever. And it wasn't love at first sight, and I've never seen him again. But it was just this, you know, this just tiny experience that stuck with me. And then when I was thinking about love at first sight and that kind of thing, and just some way to kind of start the story, that came back, and I just thought, you know, played around with that. And I was talking to my editor about it, and she said, you know, what I really want is a story that kind of feels like the big love stories on film. So the big Christmas love stories like Love Actually and um, oh gosh, all of the Christmas movies that give you that kind of magical, you sit down and you put it on, and even though you know what's coming, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, you know, and it's just trying to capture that magic of those Christmas movies and put it into a book was the brief, um, which sent me into a bit of a oh my god tailspin. But so that was where it started. Really, was just this kind of small instance from my past that I remember, and then this request to write a big kind of Christmassy love story.
USA Today urged readers to set aside some time and prepare to be charmed as author Josie Silver takes you on a captivating journey where female friendship's as important as romantic love in this unmistakable winter. In that spirit, we'd love to meet Lori, Sarah, and Jack. Do you struggle over the sequence of how this year would pass between when Lori first lays eyes on Jack and by the time she meets back up with him a year later, finds him on the arm of her best friend Sarah?
Definitely Laurie first for me. She's an and like an everyday kind of girl. She's very relatable. She gets things wrong a lot, and she's always trying to do her best, but sometimes failing. So I think she's very relatable. So she definitely was my start point. And then Sarah, her best friend and flatmate, is kind of the mirror of everything that Laurie isn't. She's a little bit more glamorous and a little bit more confident, and but very lovable. There's no side to her. She's just uber. Whereas Laurie is just kind of, more relatable girl next door. And then Jack. Sometimes he's not very nice, he's a very normal kind of guy. He's very I've had a lot of feedback on Jack that kind of says that, he's very um sometimes you don't like him very much. But that's because he goes through quite a lot of um evolutionary stuff in his character throughout the book where some big things happen to him and kind of round him out as a person. Um, and I like to do that really with my characters is give them they're not villains, they're not heroes, they're just everyday people in sometimes extraordinary situations. And um, yeah, so and having his point of view on the page was important, I think, particularly because he's not very likable sometimes. You can actually see why he is the way that he is. And I think that hopefully kind of gives people an insight into him and makes him understandable, even if you don't particularly like his behavior sometimes. Because we're all like that, aren't we? Sometimes we do things that, you know, from the outside might look questionable or, um, we all have good days and bad days, don't we? And I think I like to put that down on the page for my characters rather than them have this, fantasy life that you can't relate to.
Now, without dispute, the Hello Sunshine Book Club is a gateway to so many authors getting the sort of attention you did after Reese Witherspoon picked the aforementioned book as among her favorite official selections. How life changing was that moment for you professionally?
For that book, particularly, it was obviously when it was selected by Reese Witherspoon for her book club. That was just like out of body experience, really. It was so unexpected, and um, obviously the exposure that gave the story, and it went from being just mine to being everybody's in this way that just kind of blew my brain. And that it hit number one on the New York Times bestseller list at Christmas. It was like a Christmas fairy tale that I couldn't have actually written. It was so lovely. Um, so that was definitely a career highlight with regards to One Day in December.
The Today Show promise of the two lives of Lydia Bird that it would make you laugh, cry, and think about the precious gift of being in love. Well, Jodi Picoult sang the praises of this beautiful emotional gift that Josie Silver's given us. Where did you first get hit with this brilliant twist after Lydia loses longtime love Freddie in a car accident, and through her sister Ellie and best friend Jonah, tries to get back out there to find love again, and albeit with that alternate reality created entirely within her dreams?
It was the idea first with that one. I'd watched something on the TV about multiverses, and as I've said already, science is really not my big my my best subject. But I did buy some books on multiverse and have a read and kind of think, where can I pull from that just enough for it to work as a love story and as something that doesn't feel heavy as a subject, because it touches on grief. Obviously, it's about a girl who's lost her partner, um, and that happens right at the very beginning. So it kind of plunges you straight in at the moment where she loses him, and then she finds this way of kind of being back in his world, and it's kind of balancing the how can I put it? It's kind of like there's two parallel worlds running together, and she has to make a decision as to which one really is going to be, right for her long term. And there is only one outcome really, and I think the readers know all along what's going to happen with it. And that's the same, I think, most of the time with romance, isn't it? The readers know what to expect is going to happen at the end, but it's the journey that gets you there that makes romance such a satisfying genre to read.
Quirky, funny in that smart British way, and truly enjoyable. This smart rom com is a book to pack for your next adventure. Good Morning America celebrated a One Night on the Island. What inspired you to want to put your own spin on the dating columnist searching for love trope, as originally as you did here, with then telling Cleo Wilder and Max Sullivan's opposites attract story set in Ireland?
That was fun to write actually because she's a dating columnist and her editor sends her away to this island to kind of, because she's single and she's been single for a long time, to marry herself. Is kind of the concept, is that she has this moment of realization where she is the she realizes that she doesn't need someone else to complete her, that she is already complete, and that's kind of the message that she's trying to get across with this. But as soon as she gets there, she bumps into Mac, literally, the only other person on the island who's come to stay, who's not a local. And it's one of those two people, one bed kind of scenarios. And he's very, he's got loads of baggage, and he's got doesn't want anything to do with her, and she doesn't want anything to do with him. And it's kind of like, um, Parent Trap, the movie. I love Parent Trap, and I like that sparky charisma between the two characters. And I think I'd kind of got those in my mind, for the dialogue and for the way that they kind of interact with each other. Um, so yeah, and there's a big community on that island, I think, which is a theme with most of my books actually, is I usually have my central characters and then I'll have quite a big ensemble supporting cast around them to pull in the humour and the sibling rivalry and that kind of stuff. I love to write siblings because I've got my own elder sister and younger brother, and I'm kind of in the middle. And we all get on, spend a lot of time together. So sibling relationships tend to find their way into my stories. Um, so yeah, I like a big community kind of feel, and I've always got someone who I've always got Bill Nighy somewhere in the story. Someone is going to be played by Bill Nighy at some point on screen in one of my stories. That's my big hope. So I always insert a character in there that could be Bill Nighy.
In 1985 New York, up-and-coming musician Vivian falls in love with musician Santo Bellotti over 2 whirlwind days, but has to leave him behind to embark on a tour with her band. In parting, Santo gives Vivian his family's secret gelato recipe, which has kept their shop thriving for decades, and she vows to one day return with it. In the present day, Vivian's 34-year-old daughter Iris has just moved to New York with little more than her late mother's pink melamine bowls and a secret recipe for the gelato they ate from them. Iris, a former chef, takes up a job at a dingy noodle restaurant on Christie Street, making fast friends with its owner, Bobby Hahn. She's content to keep her life small, sticking close to her tiny apartment over the restaurant. But when Bobby takes her to Little Italy, Iris stumbles upon a door she's only seen in one of her mother's photographs of Santo, the only man she ever loved. The door belongs to Bellotti's Gelateria, famous for its vanilla gelato, the same gelato Vivian's mother made for her. When Iris enters the shop, she meets Santo's 39-year-old nephew, Gio, learns that Santo had a stroke and can't remember the recipe. Now Iris is the only one who can help the Bellotti family. Can she do it without revealing Santo's secret? When you were deciding whether or not she could, what made the Big Apple feel like the right backdrop to set a winner in New York against?
I've never actually been to New York, which was a challenge. And it was just at the end of lockdown that I was writing that book. So there was no opportunity to go to New York and do any research or anything. So YouTube was my best friend, because there's loads of walking tours and that kind of stuff. So I kind of spent hours immersed in other people's experiences of New York and speaking to people and kind of, I feel like I've almost been there. And I'm lucky that I've got an American editor, so she was super helpful. Um, so that gave me the confidence, I think, to set it in New York, even though I've never been. Um, I'd love to go now. I mean, I've got so many things I'd like to see there. I'd like to do the walking tour of my book and see all the places where it was set. So that's on the bucket list.
Talent agent Charlie Francisco has three problems: a divorce that ended his screenwriting career, a business he never planned to inherit, and a take your breath away romance novel whose author wants nothing to do with its publication. The book's a surefire hit. If only his agency can find someone to play the author on its summer book tour the book reporter advertises of the sparks page by page that fly in Slowburn Summer. Please introduce viewers who haven't met him yet to Charlie and his potential fix for all the aforementioned dilemmas in Kate Elliott, a former soap actress who's miraculously right for the part at the very moment her life seems to be going all wrong. But she can't really know who wrote the remarkable story, the one so beautiful it's made her believe in love again. When Kate and Charlie meet, they're all friction and sparks. And as the summer heats up and the lies get bigger and bigger, can they stick to their lines or will they go off script?
In Slowburn Summer, Charlie Francisco is a talent agent, and Kate Elliott is a out of work actress. It's actually set in the UK in London. It is um, she, they're both a little bit older than your kind of usual main characters for love stories. So they're both just kind of he's just over 40, she's just under, and they're both in the same similar kind of position in life in that she's just freshly divorced and daughter's just gone off to university, so she's at this transitional point where she's everything's up in the air and she's kind of reinventing herself. um, and he's the same really. He's just come back from he was a scriptwriter in Hollywood, so he's just come back to take over his father's business because his dad's died unexpectedly. So um, in Slowburn Summer, that's kind of the setup of who they are. They're both quite damaged characters, I think, in terms of romance in the past. So they come at it from quite a well, neither of them are looking for romance, which is very often the case with my characters, is that, people find romance when they're least expecting it. Um, and I think for these, it's kind of a case of thinking, what does this character really need from someone else? Um, and for Kate, because she'd been married for a long time to a man who was quite dictatorial, to have someone like Charlie who's very easygoing and very kind and very, kind of cinnamon man, I think they call it, or cinnamon bun man, I think it is, which is, kind of sweet and kind of, good for the soul. Um, so he was what she needed at the time. Not to say that he's dull, he's not. He's, really funny and handsome, and there's all those sparks that kind of fly between them. Um, and I just love writing love stories, really. That's I've tried to write other things, and it always comes back around to, if you cut me through, you'd find love story writer, written through me. I'm just totally all about romance, really. I read it, I watch it, I write it. It's just what I am, I think. I'm just a romance writer. The basic of the story is that she takes on the part of there's an author that's written a book, and he's a thriller writer and doesn't want to write love stories, but he lost his wife and wrote this beautiful love story, which his agent has kind of, coerced him into putting out there. And the condition that he's put on it is that he doesn't want his name on the front. So Kate takes on the job of playing the author, which they think is going to be pretty straightforward. Just, on the jacket, a face on the jacket and just a name on the front, and a few podcasts, that kind of stuff. But the book becomes super successful and grows and grows, and the demands on her subsequently go from being kind of just a few written interviews to appearing on TV and to going to events and appearing actually as the author. And it's kind of like an organic lie that gets bigger and bigger and kind of takes over, and it gets to that point of feeling like instead of being an acting job where she's pretending to be this author, she has to kind of be the author genuinely in front of other people, and that wasn't what she signed up for. And it's how she deals with that, and how Charlie deals with that as her agent and protects her from the fallout, the inevitable fallout, as the lie grows and gets bigger.
So, as you were building one between these two, what marked any of your favorite moments of friction that could in turn spark a connection in terms of situational setups as you wrote?
the first time they meet is always important. So trying to find a different way to set up the meet cute, if you like. In this book in particular, she used to be an actress 20 years ago, and she writes to her ex-agent when she's suddenly on her own again and asks, "Is there any place in the acting world for me?" Only to find that her agent has died and his son has taken over, which is Charlie. And he calls her in, and it's that initial meeting of she was expecting something else, he was expecting something else, and it's that, right in that moment is it. I probably wrote it 3 or 4 different ways um, to get to the right way that feels sparky enough, but not too sparky because it's slow burn. And that's the thing I think with this story in particular is the slow burn element is really there for the romance. Because they're both kind of guarded and they've been through their own stuff that's brought them to a place where they're not expecting romance. So adding it as a slow burn throughout the story, there's a lot of character growth particularly for Kate. We go on quite a journey with her.
Is it safe to assume you were drawing on your own experiences in publishing as you wove this story toward its conclusion?
A lot of it, I think, I drew on my own experiences I mean, even as simple as when she was given her new writing name. It was kind of there's an experience in there that's exactly what I went through when I went from being my previous author names to Josie Silver. Um, I wasn't sure what my name was going to be, and my editor said, "Well, leave it with me. We'll talk to the team and come up with, an author name that feels right for you." And my name's Jo. My actual name is Jo. So I said, "That's my only stipulation, really. I'd like it to be based on Jo." And they sent me this email a week later, which kind of said, "Welcome to your new name." And it was kind of like, what's it going to be? So that was kind of an experience for me as an author, where I open the email and find out who I'm going to be. And that's kind of replicated in the book, really. Exactly what happened to me happens to her. Um, and it's a weird feeling, to open the email and see, "Welcome to your author name, Josie Silver." So that was how I came to be Josie Silver, which it now feels I've been Josie Silver for long enough for it to feel, you know, authentic to me. But that's kind of one of the things that happened to her in the book. And there's another experience in there where she got called in to do a radio station show. And everything that could go wrong does go wrong as she's on the way to London. Um, and that pretty much word for word is what happened to me when I got called in. So I've found that I can put quite a lot of myself into this character more than I ever have, probably because she's an author and she's finding a way. Um, so that's been a particular pleasure with this book is embroidering a lot of what I've learned myself, and adding in all the like juicy stuff from the industry, from the publishing world, the publicity meetings and the marketing, that when you go into I think as a reader, that's really fascinating to know the back works, how it all goes, how it all gets put together and all those meetings that happen and the things that you don't think happen that do. So it was nice to put that really in. I think as a reader, that's interesting, isn't it? And for this book, the romance reading community is huge, and it's so powerful in terms of the community of the romance reading community. I just love it. And this book, I think, is kind of like a love letter to the romance reading community. It just, they're so supportive and so, great at helping spread the word about books and stuff. And that was what I wanted to get across in this book, really, was the community of the romance reading community, as much as the family relationships and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was nice to write a book that's kind of based in the industry that I work in and be able to put so much of my own kind of experiences in there as well.
We'd next love to meet Melanie Bittersweet, star of your girls' ghost busting agency that drives crazy spooky love, and any of your favorite supporting cast co-stars who joined her in her ghoul catching adventures.
This is absolutely different to anything that I've ever written before. I actually wrote these books, oh gosh, originally probably about 7 or 8 years ago. And they came out with a small press, and at the time, there wasn't really the thirst for magical realism and all that kind of stuff that's kind of exploded recently into the romance arena. Um, so recently, I got the rights back to them recently and talked to my editor, and we've given them a bit of an overhaul, and we've spiced them up a bit because that's what the romance that's where the romance readership has gone. Um, but they're funny and they're madcap and they're kind of much lighter in terms of the story elements than my usual love story. They're not love story centric. They're more Melody is a girl who just sees ghosts, and she's grown up in a family where all the women see ghosts. And she decides to open a ghost busting agency with her best friend. And they've got this really hopeless, lovely teenager who helps them as their assistant. And the three of them kind of do ghost busting as their job. They have this clapped out van that they paint across the side, and then of course there is love interest. So Melody had a rakish kind of ex who's also happens to be someone who can see ghosts. And that's Leo. And then a news reporter who doesn't believe at all in anything to do with ghosts, and that's Fletch. So Leo, Fletch, and Melody form this triangle of really funny, sparky kind of. Leo and Fletch don't get on. Melody and Fletch don't get on a lot of the time, but then they really do get on every now and then. Um, so it's very light-hearted and it's designed to make people laugh, and um, it's got it's got depth, but it's got depth kind of lightly added in a way that my other books perhaps touch on more weighty subjects. These are written for fun and for escapism. Melody's family, she lives in a building where she's got a separate apartment, but there's her mom and her grandmother, and they were great fun to write. They're really sparky, really um, strong women, um, which is kind of the theme of the book, I think, is the Bittersweet women are all quirky and different and really strong-willed in their own way, and they're all really funny. Well, I think they're funny. So I'm hoping that humour comes across on the page. And yeah, the grandmother in particular is, she drinks champagne out of teacups for breakfast, and she does all the things that, everybody wishes they could do, but, don't because nothing holds her back. She's one of those women that everyone aspires to be. So I think it's the family relationships within it that provide the fun, and then the spark is particularly from Fletch and Melody. They're the big love story within the story.
What can fans look forward to in the second paranormal powerhouse that plays out over kooky spooky love?
The second story is set in a castle, and the first was in a haunted house with some brothers, with a mystery that needed resolving, which is different for me. I've never written mystery before, so that was fun to try my hand at, adding mystery into it. Um, and the second one, yeah, that's set in a castle, um, and they all have to move in, and Leo, her ex, has the job, and she has the job. So they're kind of competing to try and solve the mystery and get rid of the ghosts in the castle and to understand how to do that. So yeah, it's quite madcap and it's quite fast paced. Um, it's very different for me, but I really enjoyed writing them, and I've got the third one to write to kind of round out the trilogy. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That's my next project.
Beyond these titles we've discussed, what's coming up next on the creative horizon for you?
I don't think there's very much I can say about it yet. I think it's going to be set in a department store, and I think it's going to be Christmassy. Um, and obviously, it's going to resolve the love triangle between Melody, Fletch, and Leo. But other than that, no, I think my lips are sealed because my fingers haven't worked it out yet.
Finally, as someone who's wise to the writing road and all that comes with it, what guidance can you give to the aspiring author traveling it right now on how to get where they want to go?
I think it's just developing that thick skin, isn't it, to survive the ups and downs of the industry because it's changing so much, and you get knockbacks at all stages, whether you're at the beginning or like any point in your career. You're always going to get knockbacks and no's, and that's the tough thing, I think. So working on your thick skin, I think, is really important. Um, yeah, it's I think it's the best job in the world. I honestly do. So I think it's worth the knockbacks for the moments of magic.
Josie, it's been wonderful talking today. Thank you so much for taking time to be on About the Authors TV.
Good to meet you.